Well, as many of you know, my first pastorate was in Milesburg, Pennsylvania. Church membership, when I got there, 52 people. I asked the pastor nominating committee when they invited me what they wanted from me as their new pastor. And they said, well, good biblical preaching, proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ each week. We want to be a growing church, so we want you to bring people into the church from the community. We want you to work with the youth of the church and in the community. We want to be known as a mission church, so we want you to guide us in mission, and we want you to oversee all the church programs. All right, great. Basically, you want me to do 5 things. Right? 5 things. Shouldn't be a problem. But you see, what the pastor nominating committee wrote down on a piece of paper was not reality. Reality was that except for the woman who came in and cleaned the church for 4 hours each week, I was the custodian. Except for the woman who came in to print the newsletter, I was responsible for creating the monthly newsletter. I was also the Sunday school teacher for adults. I functioned as the youth director. I was my own secretary, answering all church correspondence. I moderated session, deacons, trustees meetings, as well as subcommittees. They had forgotten to write down on the paper that really in the hearts of each and every one of those 52 members, they expected a home visit from the pastor each week. And it took me just 3 months to realize that the way this pastoral call was set up was all wrong. It was stressing me out to no end. And maybe you can see how when I started at Milesburg Presbyterian Church, I felt like Moses. Church life revolved around me, just like life back then revolved around Moses. Nothing could happen without me, like nothing could happen without Moses. These people obviously needed me, just like I'm sure Moses thought. Clearly I'm indispensable because I'm the only one who can do it, just like Moses thought. They think that I am the only one who can meet their spiritual needs. Hogwash! Hogwash is what I say. All that leadership paradigm did was stress me out. I don't know, is there anybody here who's stressed? I mean, most of you are retired. You don't have any stress. I mean, who are we kidding? The word stress actually comes from the Latin word that means to be drawn tight. Anybody here slightly uptight about anything? How many times do you hear someone say, I'm all stressed out? I know a lot of people who are all stressed up and have no place to go. Well, consider these facts. 7 out of 10 people feel great stress at some point during a typical day, especially if they have a career, but even if they are retired. Somewhere between 75 and 80% of all visits to the doctor's office have something to do with stress. 34% of the population report difficulty in sleeping because of stress. Stress is known to be one of the leading causes now of heart disease and cancer. Is one of the leading causes of depression. Many times it can lead to migraine, headaches, hypertension, chest pains, ulcers, gastritis, colitis, and heartburn. Has anyone been there? Is anyone here today under stress? You see, we all know people who are under stress, and so we want to help them out. So you ask them, how you doing? I'm fine. I'm fine is what they say, which is code, as Lorraine Benjamin will tell you, for fearful, insecure, nervous, and exhausted. So what about pastors? You know, a study by a leading Christian think tank back in 2014 reported that stress and exhaustion in pastoral ministry causes as many as 70% of pastors to regularly consider leaving the pastorate. Many of them actually do. California-based Schaefer Institute of Church Leadership Development found that about 3/4 of pastors thought about leaving the ministry due to clergy burnout, and about 40% of them actually did after only 5 years in the church. But fortunately, God has an answer for stress. In fact, there's a story of one of the greatest men in all the Bible who almost burned out and died early because he was burning the candle at both ends and his load was just too heavy. Moses was the first stressed out person described for us in the Bible. He was a workaholic. He was a classic case of burnout. He was trying to do more than God wanted him to do. He was trying to do it all by himself because he thought he was indispensable. Through a wise father-in-law, Jethro, he wasn't even a Jew, he was a Midianite. God intervened and literally saved both Moses' life and the nation of Israel that he was leading and serving at the time. In this passage from Exodus 18, God shares with us how to overcome stress in our lives. I can summarize what God is trying to teach us here in 2 sentences. Do only what you only can do, and delegate the rest to others and leave the results to God. So let's do what Moses did after speaking with Jethro. Be honest with yourself this morning about your strengths and your weaknesses, and then set your limitations. See, we first must understand what stress is. Stress is the gap between demands that are placed upon us in everyday life and the strength that we have in meeting those demands. Different people call that different things. Some call it the stress factor, others refer to it as the stress ratio, others call it the stress component, some say it's the stress formula. But listen again, the gap between demands that are placed upon us in everyday life and the strength that we have in meeting those demands. Another way to express it is the gap between my ought to's and my can't do. When my can do can keep up with my want to, or can't keep up with my want to, I have frustration, I have tension, I have stress. That was exactly the problem with Moses. It came about the next day that Moses sat to judge the people. The people stood about Moses for how long? From morning, before the sun came up, to evening, after the sun went down. Must have made Moses feel very important and indispensable. Now, when Moses' father-in-law saw that he was doing for the people, he had this comment. What is this thing that you are doing for the people? Why do you do it alone? All the people stand before you from morning until evening. Moses said to his father-in-law, well, it's obvious, isn't it? Because the people come to see me to inquire of God. I mean, when they have this dispute, they bring it to me, and I judge between a man and his neighbor, and make known the statutes of God and his laws. And Moses, his father-in-law, said to him, the thing that you are doing is not good. You will surely wear out both yourself and these people who are with you, for the task is too heavy for you. Now get this, you cannot do it alone. I want you to see that Moses' stress was honestly earned. He was trying to please God. I mean, he might have thought too highly of himself, yes, that he was indispensable, but at least he was trying to do right for God. A lot of us stress ourselves out trying to do the right thing for God. Sometimes we get stressed out because we procrastinate, or maybe we don't do what we ought to do when we ought to do it, or we are just plain lazy, and we let things go undone. Well, not Moses. Moses was not lazy. He was a type A personality. He was getting into the office before sunup. He was leaving after sundown. He was working 6 days a week, no vacation, no time off. He was a classic workaholic. His fuel tank was empty. He had not only reached his limits, he had exceeded his limits, and now he had to set his limits. See, in the 19th century, the shipping industry was having a very difficult time because more and more of their ships were sinking at sea during bad storms. In 1880, Samuel Plimsoll, do you know Sam? Anybody knows? Nobody knows Sam. Samuel Plimsoll, he was of the United Kingdom, came up with a solution. His premise was that in order to make greater profits, shippers were filling their ships with more freight than the ships could handle. So Plimsoll submitted a bill to Parliament insisting that a line be drawn around the outside of the hull on all British ships. And when the ships were loaded with freight and reached the level where the line on the outside of the ship hit the water line, the shippers were not allowed to load any more freight, because he knew that any load heavier than that would sink the ship in a strong storm. And that marking on a ship's hull became known as the console line. And I'll tell you what, ships have them, and we have them too. We all have limits. Have you ever noticed when you're on the highway and you're behind a huge trailer that is carrying a large cargo of freight? There is a sign that tells the load limit that truck can carry. Well, if a tractor trailer with a massive engine and unbelievable power has limits to its load, so do we. During the summer of my high school and college years, I was an umpire. And during the day, I worked at Briggs & Jones, a wallpaper, flooring, and paint company just outside of Youngstown, Ohio. When my day at Briggs & Jones ended, I would hop in my car, grab a dinner at a fast food restaurant, eat that dinner as fast as I could on the way to the game. And yes, this was so stupid. I changed clothes from my working clothes at Briggs & Jones into my umpiring clothes as I drove. That was crazy, I know. From 4 o'clock until 7, I umpired usually 2 games. Maybe a little league games, minor league games. And then from 9 until midnight, I'd drive to another location. I would do a Class AA game or a Class B game. And the next day, guess what? I'd wake up and do it all over again. At the beginning of the summer, I loved it. I thought this was the best a person could be. By the time the end of July and the beginning of August came around, Lord, please make it rain. Please make it rain. It was too much. That was Moses' problem. He loved being a judge, but it was taking up every waking hour of his day. Moses looked a lot on the outside like I did in May and early June. I'm fine. I'm fine. But inside, he was dying. He couldn't see it. Wouldn't admit to it. He was in denial. Jethro saw it. He was literally stressed out. Moses was burning the candle at both ends, and now the wax is almost gone. And do you remember what his father-in-law told him in verse 18? You will surely wear out. It's ironic. The Hebrew word for wearing out literally means to become old. Moses was growing old before his time. He was wearing himself out. My grandmother had a grandmother clock. We hired a professional who worked specifically with those types of clocks when they came to her house. Said there's 2 dangers that you need to avoid with this type of clock. Don't let it ever run down completely. And don't wind it too tight. And that is exactly what happened to Moses and what happens to us. When we get wound too tight, we also begin to run down. Remember the key takeaway today. Do only what you only can do. Delegate the rest to others and leave the results to God. Once you see your limitations and you realize there are some things you simply can't do, then you can and will be able to share the load. When you are carrying too much and the load is too heavy, you will eventually share that load one way or another. You will either finally collapse under the load where you cannot carry any part of the load any longer, or you will share a part of that load early on so that you can carry the load by doing what you ought to be doing. And that was exactly the advice that Moses' father-in-law gives to Moses. You shall select out of all the people who fear God, and you shall place these capable individuals over the people as leaders of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens. Let them judge the people, and let it be that every major dispute they bring to you will be brought to you, but every minor dispute they themselves will judge. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. Moses' father-in-law tells him to share the load, to get other people involved in doing things that they can do so that Moses can do what only he can do. If you are trying to lift a heavy load, I'll tell you what, 2 hands are better than 1. But I'll tell you this also, 6 hands are better than 2. It is not the size of the job that causes stress, it's the sharing of a job that determines whether or not that job is stressful. And that's why I love team ministry. That's what I learned in Milesburg. I was told at first I had to do everything, right? After a panic attack that first Christmas, I went to the members of the church and I said, I can't do this by myself any longer. I need your help. Everybody has a gift. Everybody has a passion. I need you to use your gift, and I need you to be passionate about using it. And in 6 years, under that paradigm, we grew that church from 52 members to 219. I couldn't do that by myself. I need everyone to chip in. The job of a pastor is not to be an expert at everything. But actually, you know what it is to make yourself obsolete. To equip other people to do what you're doing. Let everyone in the church use his or her talents. And again, that's why I appreciate team ministry. I know what my strengths are. But you know what? I know what my weaknesses are as well. Those weaknesses stress me out. Unless I surround myself with people who are good at what I'm not good at. That's why we have the best associate pastor in Sun City West and Pastor Linda. We have the best music director in Sun City West and Wendy Fenton. We have a parish nurse here today. I will tell you this, there is not one other parish nurse in the entire area that's in their church this morning being a parish nurse. Only Lorraine Benjamin. She's the best parish nurse. Rachel isn't here this morning. Don't let it go to her head, but she is the best church nurse. But I mean, did you listen to the bells? Did you listen to the choir? Did you hear the voices of praise? Did you hear these instruments? Were you greeted by people, the ushers? Everybody doing their job and doing it well. That's one of the greatest leadership lessons I've learned, is that you delegate to others what others can do so you can focus on the things that only you can do. Nobody is indispensable, but everybody is important. Remember that about ministry. Ministry can be difficult, but ministry also brings blessings. That's what Charlie told me. One of the reasons why other people need to get involved in the work of ministry is so that they can enjoy those blessings as well. We need to seek the Lord. We need to listen to what the Lord is calling us to do. You all have gifts and talents. Maybe it is to serve as an elder. Maybe it is to serve as a deacon or in the nominating committee, but there are so many other places where you can use your gifts. Each and every one of us needs to volunteer to do exactly that so that Desert Palms Presbyterian Church can become everything that it's intended to be. I was thinking back in 2001 in Lincoln, Nebraska, the property committee said, you know, we got a whole bunch of stuff to do around this church. We're going to pick a Saturday and invite the church to come. And they got up for 6 Sundays in a row and said, on Saturday such and such, we got this work to do. And that Saturday came. You know how many people showed up? The 6 people on the property committee. And they worked really hard. I worked with them. We worked from 8 a.m. in the morning to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We didn't get anywhere near all the work done. So the next year what we did is each one of the 6 of us said, we'll personally invite people. And we went out and we personally invited people face to face and said, hey, we need you to be there this Saturday. That year, 43 people showed up. And what we could not do the year before, we got done in 1 hour and 42 minutes. And then people were there and said, what else do you want me to do? Team ministry. That's what we're talking about today. We want you to write down the names of individuals that you feel would make excellent elders, deacons, people who serve on the pastor nominating committee. And during the singing of this last hymn, the ushers are going to come forward and receive those sheets that you filled out in the offering plate this morning. Together, as we share the load, we will become all that God intends for us to be. Amen?